So welcome everybody to our first edition of Plant Health Club, sort of for the autumn. So as a reminder for anyone who might be new to Plant Health Club, our Plant Health Club is an initiative of the British Society for Plant Pathology, which if you're not already a member, you might want to consider becoming a member. You are to encourage others to do so. The Plant Health Club itself is free. We run one of these sessions on a monthly basis during most of the year, but as a BSP member, you can access lots of other benefits, including funding for internships, bursaries, travel visits, visits to other laboratories, and outreach, and the promotion of plant pathology, which is particularly timely if we think about what we're going to be hearing about in today's presentation, because in practice, one of the things that we could fund if society members wanted to seek funding was funding to get involved in citizen science projects that would promote plant pathology. Right. Okay, so with no further ado, I'm going to pass over to my co-host now, who's going to introduce Nadia, who's going to introduce our speakers for today. There you are, Lisa.
Thanks a lot, Gail. Hey everyone, my name is Nai and I will be the co-chair of today's Plant Health Club. Just a few details before we start. So some housekeeping for today's session. Please ensure that your microphone is on mute during the presentation. This introduction and the subsequent presentations will be recorded or are actually currently being recorded, but any questions and discussions afterwards will not be. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A and a general discussion. Then there will be a period where participants will be divided into the different breakout rooms. And at this point, please feel free to unmute to take part of in the discussions. Our speakers for today are Rebecca Gosling and David Slauson. Rebecca is a conservation evidence officer for tree health at the Woodland Trust, which includes the Observatory project. And David, who is mostly retired, but extremely active currently, mostly, for example, an active volunteer with Observatory. He is a trustee of the National Biodiversity Network and a member of the Science Committee of the Royal Horticultural Society. Previously, David was the director of the Open Air Laboratory at Imperial College, among other functions. And with that very quick introduction, I will pass it on to Rebecca and David.
I've shared my screen. Has that worked?
Yes.
Yes, great. Over to you, David.
Okay, right. Yeah, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak to the BSPP. I should confess that I am a very old, rusty plant pathologist in my time. And formerly, I was a member for several years of the BSPP. So it's lovely to be speaking to you again. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so and thank you also for inviting us to speak about citizen science, because this is not a concept that's shouldn't be new to anybody really, but I think lots of people might not be aware of it. So this is a great opportunity to us to introduce it to you. It has actually made it into the Oxford English Dictionary, where you'll see there, that the definition of citizen science is scientific work undertaken by members of the general public, often in collaboration with or under the direction of professional scientists and scientific institutions. And a citizen scientist is a member of the general public who engages in scientific work, often in collaboration or under the direction of professional scientists and scientific institutions. So an amateur scientist. So if we, next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so but it's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun, they say, and I think this is probably true of citizen science. So if you look back to even people like Charles Darwin and his voyage of discovery on the Beagle, he wasn't a professional scientist at the time. He in effect was a private member of the public, so it wasn't organized into a university or an institution or anything like that. So you could argue that Charles Darwin was a forerunner of citizen science. But even a little bit more recently, there's been a bird survey in the United States since the late 1800s. Again, a sort of a bird survey, a bit like our RSPB Big Garden Bird Watch, but literally millions and millions of species records in the United States conducted by this survey, by citizens, private people at home in their gardens. So again, that really is sort of volunteers and members of the public participating in scientific activity. It wasn't really until about the 1980s that the phrase of citizen science was first coined by various first people. Rick Bonney was one of them in the book that I've put there on the slide. And since then, really, you can see the Google trends for citizen science has gone up and up ever since. And if we had a 2022 on there, I'm sure it will be even higher. So our next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so what is citizen science? Well, there is a spectrum there, and various people sit at either end of that spectrum or occasionally try to span that spectrum. So on the left-hand side there, where I guess a lot of the members of the BSPP will work, there's sort of scientific research where really you're very interested in data and evidence, and citizen science can certainly help to fill some of those data and evidence gaps. But on the far right then, there's outreach, and I always think this is part of citizen science, although some purists will say, no, it's only data, but it was included in outreach. There's things like engaging the public, raising their awareness, teaching them new skills, developing them, and then sort of empowering them as well to take action themselves, or actually stewardship as well. And what I mean by that is sort of like taking responsibility for their local environment. So if we think in a plant health concern, that could be responsible buying of their plants into their gardens to avoid bringing in new pests and diseases on them. It could be simple things like just always cleaning their footwear when they go out for a walk, so as they don't spread a pest or disease from one way to one place to the other. So it's a broad spectrum within citizen science, and you can sit in far left or far right or try and span all of it. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So I thought I'd give you just a quick case study of a general citizen science project, and this is the Opal project, which I was heavily involved with a few years ago. And I should say that Opal actually stands for the Open Air Laboratories Project. And the idea of it really, amongst trying to engage large numbers of people with nature through doing scientific activity, but the open air bit was really trying to get the scientists out of the laboratory and out into the community and out into nature as well. So to get them out of the laboratory and speaking to people and passing on their skills and their knowledge and their enthusiasm and their interest to the general public. So Opal was set up around 2008, and it was a series there of sort of national surveys and activities on different environmental topics. So there was an air survey looking at lichens on trees to introduce the idea of air quality. Earthworms looking for soil health indicators. There was a pond, a water survey, a climate survey with the Met Office, a biodiversity survey looking at the sort of insects in hedgerows. There was a bugs count survey, which was really aimed at getting school children interested in insects. And then if we come to the ones that are perhaps more relevant to the BSPP audience, there was a tree health survey that started in 2014. And this really started about the same time as the observatory, which you'll hear more about from Rebecca. But Kalara had just come into the country then, and the government was taking lots of action. But part of that action was about raising awareness and getting engagement with the public. So these tree health citizen science projects, both Opal and Observatory, were aimed in that direction. Since then, there was a pollination survey, which was aimed at school children and private individuals taking action to improve their pollination status of their gardens and things. And we've also done surveys on invasive species, which again would be relevant to BSPP. So the one there, sort of the bottom right of the suite on the pictures, there was a New Zealand flatworm survey that we did through the Opal resources. And that was all supported by a load of websites and tools. So iSpot and iRecord and Indicia software recording was all developed under the auspices of the Opal project. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so what were the outcomes of the project? Well, the Opal project did engage over 1 million people, 1 million members of the UK population were engaged, and those people actually submitted 71,000 surveys that were entered onto the Opal database. And it gave a level of spatial detail that was far greater than was possible really with traditional scientific projects. And it also gave insight, particularly into the UK urban environment, which was really poorly monitored in other national surveys, because lots of the people obviously were general members of the public. They just lived in their local areas and surveyed in their local areas. But the data was also really useful for national databases. It fed into the NBN, the National Biodiversity Network. And as I said about tree health, it was relevant to national policy concerns. So the tree health strategy and things for the United Kingdom. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so that's a broad description of citizen science, its sort of principles really, leading through to citizen science used in nature and in some tree health areas. And I'll pass over to Rebecca again now to speak specifically about the observatory project.
Thanks, David. So yeah, I'm going to chat about Observatory. So hi everyone, I'm Rebecca and I'm from the Woodland Trust, and I manage the volunteers on the Observatory project. So I'll dig into Observatory a little bit more to try and maybe show you guys how you can use citizen science in your research and your projects and how that data can actually be really valuable. Observatory is quite different from Opal. Opal was more of a broad reaching project. It had quite a large number of participants, as you have seen, 71,000, and anyone could go out and do it. Whereas Observatory, as you will see, is quite a different project, and our outcomes as a result are quite different as well. So why do we need Observatory? So I might be preaching to the choir a little bit here, so you might have to humour me. So we're here to protect the UK's woods and trees using citizen science. So we're eyes on the ground looking out for trees. As you guys probably know, we have so many different non-native invasive pests and diseases here in the UK, and we're particularly looking at the ones on trees. So what we're trying to do is create an early warning system. We're getting people out there that have been trained and know what to look for to go out and look at trees, survey trees for us and be our eyes on the ground. It would just not be possible for us to do that without citizen science, not on the spatial and temporal scale that we're doing it at. So we're also creating networks of people that care about trees. So we're not just collecting data, we're not just keeping eyes on the ground for any new arrivals that we might need to put in control measures for. We're also creating these networks, like David spoke about, of people that care about trees. That's a communication and engagement activity. And whereas our focus in Observatory is the data, we are doing that engagement and communication as well, and that's important. The more people for us that care about trees, and the more people that would take action to help us protect them. So we are generating data that informs science and the conservation of trees, and that's what I'm really going to focus on today, is a bit about how the project functions and how we generate that data, and basically what we're generating, and hopefully get you guys a bit more excited about how you could use this in your own work. So again, I might be preaching to the choir, but this graph just shows you the increasing and exponential number of invasive non-native pests and diseases that we've had arrive in the UK, and these are for trees and mainly the kind of big statutory kind of inverted commas problematic ones. So we're going right the way up to 82 spot beetle, and actually I've I'm going to lapse here and not put the latest graph on because we've got another disease on the end of here, which is Pathology pulvioris. So we've had yet another addition even since I created this graph, and we put this in our state of woods and trees here at Woodland Trust. And it just shows you that since 2000, I calculated it as a new pest or disease introduction as every 1.3 years. And we know from experience, you guys will know from experience, that as soon as these things become established, they become either very expensive or impossible to eradicate. For Phytophthora, it's very difficult to try and get rid of a Phytophthora from the wider environment. And the case studies of that being successful are very rare and very expensive. So what we want to do at the project is we want to get these eyes on the ground. So if anything else new does arrive, we will be able to put in control measures straight away and hopefully limit the damage. At the same time, we're also monitoring distribution and spread of these pests and diseases, seeing how they're moving around the country, you know, where they're moving, and they're moving in certain climates and stuff like that. And we're also monitoring if they're kind of entering new regions as well. And I'll show you about how we're kind of working with different people to make that happen. So we are a partnership project. Very nature kind of means that this needs to be a partnership project. We're led by Forest Research. So Forest Research are our lead partner. That's where our project manager sits, and it probably doesn't surprise you that that's where our data goes. As the statutory agency, they act upon things as needed with people like the Forestry Commission. Here at the Woodland Trust, we look after the volunteer management. So we manage, recruit the volunteers, make sure they're all happy as part of our partnership contribution. And then we have loads of different partners as well that bring different things to the project. And then we also have associates, and these are people that get us land access. So our volunteers actually have quite a broad range of land access across the UK through this partnership working. They have access to all sorts of lands to go out and survey. So again, just increasing our range and our spread, making sure that that data is coming in and we've got eyes on the ground looking at trees. So we were quite unique actually in a project in that we were originally EU Life funded, and that ended probably, it's about 5 years ago now. And we were quite lucky, and a lot of projects, when they lose that kind of funding, tend to stop. We actually continued, so we're now completely funded by the partners that were involved in the project. They each make their own contributions. We have a group of volunteers, and the unique thing about Observatory is that they are trained quite, I say, extensively. They receive training in 23 priority pests and diseases, and these are decided alongside DEFRA and their Plant Health Risk Register group. So we're clued in on the kind of governmental level. We're working with the people that, you know, decide the risk rating for pests and diseases in the UK, and then we use that information to decide which ones we want our volunteers to focus on looking out for. So they have to be, you know, a threat to the UK. Some of them are here and we want to monitor their distribution, and some of them are not here and we're that early warning system. They also have to have discernible symptoms in the field, so they have to be able for volunteers to go out and identify in the field. Otherwise it'd be really tough, it'd be really disengaging for our volunteers if they couldn't identify anything in the field. They struggled to say what they think it was, but also if they couldn't find anything. So we have a few things such as ash dieback and horse chestnut leaf miner, which we know our volunteers are likely, depending on where they live, go out and find. So again, we need to think about the motivation as well for the volunteers to make sure that they're feeling that they're contributing something to the project, and they are, so we want them to feel that way. So they're expertly trained in these 22 priority pests and diseases by experts from across the partnership, including Forest Research. We have a lot of resources online, which might be or might not be helpful to you. I hope they are, depending on the area of which you research. So for each 23 priority pest and disease, we've got a created observatory guide, a field identification guide, which are available on our website as PDFs, so you can go and download these for free. So I hope you'll go and look at those. And as I previously mentioned, we have kind of a communications program as well. So we are communicating, engaging with the volunteers, but we also run a communications program externally, trying to reach people in the industry to raise awareness again around pests and diseases, the importance of reporting them and the importance of biosecurity And we do this through visiting as a partnership, different kind of trade shows and doing social and, all of the kind of usual comms that would come as part of this kind of programme. So what are we looking for? These are the things that we're looking for. So some of these, again, are in the UK, some of them are not. So stuff like obviously ash dieback, horse chestnut leaf miner, orange chestnut gall wasp, cute oak, the kind of ones that are in the UK. And we're supporting researchers so they know where they are. They can go and look at sites. We support researchers in scoping out sites. We support researchers in having the monitoring, the distribution, and also collecting samples and things like that. And these researchers mainly in forest research. But we've also got stuff like Asian longhorn beetle. So we had an outbreak of this in Kent in 2012, and now we ask volunteers to go around the country and keep a lookout for any signs of Asian longhorn beetle. And it's just that early warning, eyes on the ground. And this year we added beech leaf disease, which is our first nematode associated disease. They're still not entirely sure the system of this disease and what causes it. So we're helping by not only surveying for it, but sending in samples to Ferroscience, who are testing them for the nematodes to try and discern if the nematode that's associated with it in the USA is present in the UK as well. And just showing again our resources that are available online. So this is a really popular one, our pests and disease symptoms calendar. So this sizes for diseases, there's another side for pests. And I've seen this up in a lot of offices at the Forestry Commission and people like that, just looking at in which month, what symptoms should they be looking out for. So please check out our website and see if any of these resources may be useful for you. So the training that we do, I say it is quite resource intensive to train our volunteers to maybe, how should I phrase this properly, to basically be able to identify pests and diseases to the quality that we need to have reliable data. But what we know is it's worth it and it does work. So we hold annual face-to-face training days. These are field days. We do around 10 to 12 around the country. The volunteers can come along and look at pests and diseases in the field and learn about how to identify them from colleagues from forest research. We have regular webinars for our volunteers, training webinars and pest and disease drop-ins. And these are where they hear from people across the industry about their research and what's going on. We also encourage a lot of self-directed learning using our website and our webinar recordings. And we have a lot of stuff on the website as well behind a login that only volunteers can access, and they can learn through there as well. So we are really kind of recruiting people that have a really good interest in trees and want to go ahead and learn a lot more about the threats and help us by reporting them. So our volunteers, this is their motivations. So this is from this year. We recruited 100 new volunteers this year. And these were what they said that they wanted to get out of the project, why they wanted to join us. So a lot of them want to work outdoors. That came out a lot. Their interest in trees, their interest in tree health. Also, a lot of them wanted to gain knowledge. We have some students and people that are using it as professional development because of the level of training that we provide. But what came out to me, especially when I was doing all the interviews for the volunteers, is they really just want to be outside in trees, learning more and giving back. So it's just such a lovely thing to do, to know that that's what's motivating people to help us as researchers, to help us with science, is they want to help. They're there and they want to help. They've got free time and they want to help us protect the trees that they love so much. So a bit about the industry background. We do tend to attract people from similar industries, and I think this really comes through when it comes to looking at the data, which I'll show you some of soon, as to how good our data is and to how reliable it is that we recruit people a lot of the time with a background in similar industries that allows them to pick up our training quite fast. So things such as ecology came out quite high as people that have worked in ecology. We do have tree health here, so someone did work in tree health directly, landscaping, horticulture, forestry. So people tend to come from backgrounds where they already have some base knowledge, which allows us to build upon that through our training. And this comes out in our accuracy. So in 2019, I looked at our data I looked at what the volunteers had diagnosed the tree as having, and then what the diagnosticians at Forest Research had diagnosed the tree as having. So it goes through to them and they will say they think it's this, and the volunteer will have already told me what they think it is. And 85% of the time the volunteers were correct. So that's actually a really, really high kind of, I guess, verification rate. It's actually really difficult to know what's going on with the tree out in the field. It's not an easy thing to do, to say this is what I think is causing these symptoms, especially when it comes to diseases. But that was reflected in the data as well. So pests, obvious pests such as oak processionary moth. If you live in London, you've probably seen this. An orange chestnut gall wasp that produces a big gall. It's the only galler on sweet chestnut. Elm zigzag sawfly that produce zigzag shapes within the leaf as they feed. So these ones were the most accurate. And then diseases such as phytophthora, which are particularly difficult, especially to species level. And a lot of volunteers do try to tell us the species level. And Dophostroma needle blight and things like that were a little less accurate. But overall, it came out really strong that whatever we're doing, our training, our volunteers' backgrounds, it seems to be producing us some really great, reliable data that we can then go on and use. So a few numbers for you. So we have 200 volunteers in the project. We maintain it at 200. We don't go above, and we try not to go below by doing annual recruitment to replace those that have left the project throughout the year, just through kind of natural turnover. We're looking at expanding, so we started a pilot project with the Tree Council, but actually within the project, 200 volunteers is basically the maximum that we will go to for capacity. At the moment, that's the most number of volunteers that we can support. And since 2013, this has generated over 13,000 reports for us, and this is to 2021. It doesn't include this year. Of which over 2,000 of those are for the priority pests and diseases. So our volunteers aren't just reporting on these priority pests and diseases. That's what our training focuses on, and that's what a lot of them will focus on. But they'll also send us in stuff like healthy tree reports. So not only looking at negative data, positive data, we're looking at negative data too, as with best practice. And it also allows us to monitor effort for the volunteers too. And stuff like ash and elm, actually, a healthy report is probably more interesting than a pest report these days, sadly. And they also report other pests and diseases they find in the field. If they can identify them, they'll tell us what they are. If not, they'll just tell us the symptoms that they find. And then we can try and figure out what we think they are, or the diagnosticians at Forest Research will ask for samples. And this equates to 25,000 hours of survey time. So that's a lot of survey time that these guys are putting in to help us. And we do have a database, and we're working on making this available to researchers. So if that's something you're interested in, please let us know, and we hope we'll be able to share data, both those of priority pests and diseases and healthy trees in due course. And obviously some of that will differ if it's statutory findings and things like that. So it will be cleaned to a degree, and some stuff may be taken out depending on the finding, because some of these findings can be commercially sensitive. But it's still useful data, so please get in touch if you're interested. So what we're finding is that our reports are increasing annually. The 2020 and 2021 can probably be very easily explained, but I'll say it anyway. It was the pandemic. So this just gives you an idea of the kind of data and the quantity of data that we're taking in. So the yellow bars are for healthy tree reports, the green bars are for priority pests and diseases, and the purple bars are for other pests and diseases the volunteers come across. So we're gradually going up. The 2019 big spike indicates a bigger push from us to see more healthy tree reports coming in, but we also have quite a large recruitment drive as well that year. So it's quite steady, gradually increasing, and our aims are to keep on increasing the amount of data that comes in. This just shows you here on the map the kind of distribution across the UK. So we have quite a good distribution. You'll see that we're kind of focused quite a lot down south. The southeast is where a lot of these find themselves when they enter the UK. So we do tend to prioritise the southeast with our recruitment, and we do try and gap fill as well to keep volunteers with a good spatial range across the UK. We also have projects that we run throughout the year, such as an annual non-native lacebug survey. So we run the only, as far as we're aware, UK-wide project looking for non-native lacebugs each year, and volunteers put out traps for them, send them into the entomologists at Forestry Research. We have OPM surveys as well, so they help us at the Woodland Trust out with our estate by surveying for OPM for us down and around London, so then we can hire contractors to remove the nests and put into our control. And then from across our partnership, we also look at researcher requests. So if any researchers say we want to look at doing a project, for example, on alder health, can you send out volunteers in Scotland to scope out some sites for us, find sites where the alder's not looking too happy? We will ask our volunteers to go out and look. Something that we do within the project, but in the future we might be able to expand that outwards as well. And these just gives you a level of the kind of stuff that's been reported. So ash dieback, unsurprisingly, is the most reported disease. And acute oak decline, we get quite a lot of number of reports of that as well, and that helps our Central Dendrons team, Forest Research, in their research. Our horse chestnut leaf mine is probably mainly due to volunteers thinking it's not worth reporting rather than lack of sightings. So some of these you have to kind of account for with it being citizen science data, but that is completely doable. Oh, I've lost my mouse. There it is. So a few successes is that we found the second finding of orange chestnut gall wasp. This is important because the first finding was down in Kent when they first found it, first saw it in the UK. So we said to the volunteers, do you mind just going out this weekend and seeing if you can find any of this new pest? And they found a second one in St Albans, so quite some way across in London. So this changed basically what the authorities were dealing with. They were no longer dealing with an isolated outbreak. They were now dealing with something that had potentially 2 locations or potentially already been here and spread. So that was quite an important finding for us. We've made significant contributions to the known distribution of ash dieback. And we've got the 2 Davids, one David here with us today. So David in Wales has contributed most of the dots you can see here, and basically saw on the official ash dieback map that there was loads of squares still not filled in Wales, so he went round and found them all and filled them all in. So now we know that ash dieback is across most of Wales. And then David, who's with us today, David Slauson, has also been doing the same in northern Scotland. So he's been filling in those squares. So we now know the distribution again in Scotland, and David's still working on that. So we've made quite a significant contribution there. And as I said, we've run the lacebug survey as well for 4 years now. So it's over 500 traps deployed. And we're pleased to say we've not found any oak or plain lacebug yet. So that's good. So negative data is still important. And it's good news as well in tree health. So how do they benefit trees? What are we doing? We have quick information exchange. The data that comes in goes straight into Forest Research and their diagnosticians. So if our volunteers do find something that's new to the country and needs action straight away, it will go through straight to the people that need to know about it. There's no middleman. It goes in through Tree Alert, and the diagnosticians on the other side can put in the actions. As I think I've demonstrated, we have reliable and good quality reports to help with this. We monitor for management for people like us at the Woodland Trust for our control mechanisms in our own woodlands in our estate, and we produce data for researchers. We're also part of a bigger picture. As we sit in so many different organisations across the UK involved in woodland and forestry, we're part of the bigger picture within Forest Research and the Forestry Commission, of everyone across the UK contributing this tree health data into Forest Research. Everybody that does, we're part of that bigger picture. So not just us doing it, but we're doing it mainly through volunteers, and demonstrating that citizen science can have a really valuable contribution. So I hope that's given you a good overview, and I've not rambled on too much, repeated myself too much, because I have a habit of doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass back over to David for what I'm sure will be a great closing speech.
Okay, thanks very much, Rebecca. Yeah, just a few closing slides from me really to recap on things. So the graph, the map on the left here, I think is Opal Tree Health Survey reports that were filled in. So it really does show what citizen scientists can do. So basically, I think citizen science is good for science in many ways. I think, as Rebecca mentioned, it can increase the spatial and temporal data sets. It's an excellent way to survey and monitor nature broadly, an excellent way to identify species and estimate abundance, to map distributions, and because citizens are very often based in one location, it's a very good way for them to sort of set a baseline and then to monitor environmental health, so see how it changes over time. And as we described with tree health in particular, it's a very important way and useful way to inform policy. But it's not one-sided, as I sort of hopefully showed in the introductory slides. It's really important and useful for people as well. It can introduce and engage people with science, which I think is a really, really important attribute. It provides people with a learning experience, especially for the next generation who are very keen and aware of environmental threats, climate change and loss of biodiversity. So it's a great way to engage that next generation who will be the scientists of tomorrow. So that's a really important thing. It increases people's scientific literacy. It encourages better stewardship from them. So as I said, they take responsible behaviours where they source their plants from, or how they walk in the countryside and that sort of thing. And hopefully, if their confidence increases, it sort of empowers them into involving themselves with governance in various ways. And also, from a lot of social science that's been done, it's a really great way to benefit people's physical and mental health. Because as Rebecca mentioned, lots of us say we just want to be outside in the fresh air, and that's a great way. That's a great way to do it. And if you're out there in nature, it's really good for your mental health as well. So I think final slide, Rebecca. This is probably showing my age a little bit here, but those of you of my age might know there was an advert of Heineken beer a while ago that says that it refreshes parts that other beers cannot reach. And there was a suite of very amusing films to go with it. Well, in summary, I think citizen science reaches parts that traditional science cannot reach. Okay, and then there's just one final slide, I think, Rebecca, just to say thanks very much to listening to us, and we're here to answer any of your questions.